everyone, it's Natalie Bencivenga, and welcome back for another edition of Facts Over Fear. As many of you know, I have been very outspoken about what has been happening around the nation as it pertains to immigration rights, and of course, ICE. Immigration enforcement operations are creating a ripple effect far beyond the headlines. And now the people who manage state budgets are sounding the alarm as we are seeing in real time what the economic fallout looks like when workforces begin to disappear literally overnight. Colorado State Treasurer Dave Young, along with more than a dozen other state fiscal officers, recently sent a letter to the Trump administration warning that large-scale immigration enforcements are destabilizing state and local economies. These are the officials responsible, for monitoring billions with a B in public funds, and they're seeing what communities are already experiencing. Restaurants closing mid-shift, construction projects being halted, farms and food processors unable to operate, just to name a few industries. So today we're talking about what happens when the workforce is gone in the blink of an eye, not just to the people, but to their livelihoods and as a ripple effect to our economies, and what that means for budgets, public services, and economic stability. Dave Young, Colorado State Treasurer. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. When you guys reached out, it was so perfect in terms of timing because this has been an issue that I have been wanting to talk about and haven't really found anyone that's been able to really dig in. So I really appreciate this opportunity. I wanted to just read a little bit of the letter that was signed and then just kind of get your general thoughts on why you decided to join this chorus. It says, "Dear Mr. President," and this was on February 3rd, and this is addressed to Donald J. Trump, of course, President of the United States. "Dear Mr. President, we write to express our outrage and alarm regarding recent federal immigration enforcement activities and their consequences. Each of us has deep concerns about the human toll for the climate of fear and the violence and death accompanying these operations. This letter, however, focuses squarely on the economic and fiscal damage these actions could inflict on the states and the communities we are entrusted to steward." And it goes on from there. I just wanted to give people a little taste of that because I found it really brave that you joined this chorus of voices. Why did you want to be a part of more than a dozen fiscal officials in really sounding the alarm?
Well, it's a great question. And, I think as a class of elected officials, treasurers always look at the long term. We're concerned about the day-to-day activities. We have the financial stewardship of the daily dollars of the Treasury, and we're very serious about protecting those dollars. But we also have the ability to look out in the long term. And when we see things that create destabilizing aspects of our economy, we react to that and we try to figure out how to fix that. And so, you don't have to look far from what's happened in Minneapolis to understand that there are impacts. And I think we're all outraged by that. There are a lot of people who are very brave, who are stepping forward to call us out, to be on the streets, to protest. And I admire that as well. But there are things that, as state financial officers, that we can do as well. But, if we look at what happened in Minneapolis, I mean, we're already starting to see some numbers come in and maybe $200 million in lost wages just in the city, and restaurants and businesses losing $81 million within 1 month. So it's not theoretical. We can begin to paint a picture that when people are afraid to participate in their community for one reason or another, it does have an economic impact.
So when we're looking at this and we're seeing this impact, to your point, when workers are disappearing from sectors like agriculture and construction, hospitality, I mean, life starts to really come to a standstill in these spaces. How quickly does that show up in forecasts? Because to me, this is less than really a year of intense activity that we're seeing, and we're already hearing. I mean, you just routed off it gave me heart palpitations. It's like hundreds of millions of dollars already. So how long before you really believe that we'll start to see the ripple impacts across the nation?
Well, and there's been activity, and I'm gonna speak specifically to Colorado and then
Sure.
actually describe my own, living situation here in
Yeah.
Colorado. I certainly, work in Denver. My office is at the state capitol in Denver, but I actually live in Greeley, which is about 60 miles north of Denver in, Weld County, and Weld County is an interesting county because it is one of the big economic drivers of the state's economy. Not only does it have a huge agricultural impact with, big packing plant and operations, JBS Swift, but also all the agriculture produce that is produced in Weld County, but it also
Mhm.
has oil and gas. The county is a big economic driver. As a matter of fact, Weld County is one of the top 10 agricultural producing counties in the country.
Wow.
The other 9 are in California. So this gives
Mm.
you a sense of how important these sectors are. And
Mhm.
certainly you named other sectors that maybe not are as crucial in Weld County. Certainly construction is, but hospitality, we certainly know our recreation, our skiing resorts really
Mhm.
depend on a workforce that can actually be available and function. And certainly they're suffering from drought right now, not enough snow. It's a little hard to tease out, what may be really causing a downturn in a local economy in a mountain resort town. But certainly, as these activities begin to escalate, they will be a factor. And so, we're watching across the state because doesn't really matter what part of the state it is, there's going to be impacts.
Let's talk a little bit more about an impact that maybe people aren't as familiar with. I'm in Pennsylvania, and I interviewed some people in public office here in Pennsylvania, and we talked about how some of the detention centers that have gone up in this area have not paid their rent to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid rent, and so they're in the process of being evicted. In other parts of Pennsylvania, there's been lost revenue because once the federal government buys a building, that building then is no longer taxable in terms of property tax. So we're not just seeing the productivity issue in parts of the country falling apart, and you named Minnesota, and of course what's happening in Colorado, but also what happens when a building like a detention center is built and is removing revenue from a community where that warehouse could be utilized for a business or for other prospects that would bring money into the community. Can you talk about the justification from a treasurer's perspective? How is that being justified? And are you seeing things like that happening anywhere else?
Well, we actually have detention centers here in Colorado. There's one in Aurora, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly the president called out Aurora all the way through the campaign and into the early days of his administration. But more recently, there's a detention center that is probably going to get activated up in northern Colorado, just south of Greeley in the town of Hudson. And
Mm-hmm.
so we are tracking that closely. It had been an existing correctional facility, and over time, it was not needed. It was a private correctional facility, and we made lots of changes to our statutes around incarceration and
Mm-hmm.
reduced the need for it. So it was vacant for a time, but recently has gotten into the sights of ICE, and it looks like maybe they're making an effort to stand it back up again and reactivate it. And so, there are federal buildings, quite a few of them in Colorado, and
Mm-hmm.
let's say that we are against having governmental entities
Sure.
utilizing buildings and, because they might take some bite out of the local tax base because, we love the fact that there are federal workers that are doing
Mm-hmm.
vital jobs and
Mm-hmm.
come in and support our economy that way. But, certainly with the early efforts of Doge and the decimation of the federal workforce, it becomes kind of an issue. So it's not just lost taxation, property tax, that kind of revenue. It's, what are we doing with those facilities?
Yeah.
And so when they are vital services that are needed and the federal government is rightfully there to
Mhm.
protect them. I mean, we had reports about UCAR up in Boulder that
Mhm.
the federal government, the Trump administration decided to shut down
Mm.
is really having an impact locally there. So, you know, I'm looked into the arrangements, and I did watch that version of your segment
Oh, thank you.
on with the Lehigh controller.
Mhm.
Great interview,
Thank you.
and I think the arrangement's a little different here. It's not an
Mhm.
owned facility, but it'll be a rented facility. But
Mhm.
whether they, the facility will pay taxes, but that's probably factored into the rent. So maybe not as
Yeah.
big an impact here. I haven't been able to actually dig deeply enough into the arrangements there to understand it. And I should go and check the Aurora detention facility to see because it may be a different arrangement there as well.
Yeah.
But the problem that we have is that uh, it's more the people
Yeah.
and they're wanting to be active participants in the economy.
Yeah.
And, I heard when the controller was talking about it, we don't wanna talk about citizens versus others. These are
Right.
the people who live in our state. And
Amen.
we wanna make sure that everybody is treated with respect.
Mhm.
Certainly, we don't wanna have people, who are part of a criminal element. I don't care where they're from, if the
Right.
US citizens or otherwise, that reduce our, population's, desire to be part of the community, hide out because they're scared. But we certainly don't want it to be the federal government that's causing that either. And
Right,
so
especially I
yeah,
mean, especially when you think of that idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it's sort of like
absolutely.
ICE is kinda trampling on all of those ideas, right? So, when
Yeah.
we're looking at other disruptions, are there certain public services that you're more concerned about being at risk, from education to infrastructure to healthcare? I mean, we're obviously seeing a ripple effect here, so can you talk a little bit about what's concerning to you?
Well, let me just preface that by the fact that this has been a broad and sweeping and poorly implemented, effort on the part of the
Mhm,
Trump administration, and we've seen instances where people who are here legally or
mhm.
even US citizens,
Yeah,
experience the terror of this kind of situation. You have people who don't wanna have their kids go to school.
yeah.
They don't want to go to their job, or they think they have to carry their papers everywhere, their passport with them,
Mm,
even though they're a US citizen. It's a chilling effect on people's freedom to move,
that's right.
very easily through our communities and through our economy and feel free to visit stores and restaurants. And certainly, when you have students and their families that are afraid to go to school because of the implications. I was a teacher for many, many years before I got into elected office
Mhm.
and very concerned that
Yeah,
we keep students away from the instruction that they desperately need to move forward in their lives, even ones that are here legally or are U.S. citizens. Just because of their nationality or their ethnicity, they're afraid to show up. That's terrible. That's terrible. We are preventing, those students from fully participating lifelong in their success, and then that has a ripple effect into the school district. If those
yeah.
students aren't showing up, we don't count them. There's not tax revenue. The
Mhm.
the district. And frankly, regardless, everybody who's participating in the economy, one way or the other, if they're here legally or not, they're undocumented, they're paying taxes. They're
That's right.
paying property taxes through rent.
Mhm.
Somebody they go to the store, they're paying sales taxes. And, these taxes are what fund our public services. So, if they're not participating and they're not fully engaged in the economy, this is why the things I mentioned at the top end of this conversation about what happened in Minneapolis with some
Yeah.
hard numbers now that are coming are the stark reality for the rest of communities that might be faced with this.
If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie Bencivenga. I'm with Dave Young. He is the Colorado State Treasurer. Dave, I just wanted to add to, I used to be a social worker. And what really
Hard
strikes me,
job, hard job.
thank you.
God
Yes,
love you.
it was, it
Yeah.
was, it was an amazing time and it taught me a lot. And, what also I worked with children, a lot of children. And what I learned from that experience too, and what's been weighing on my heart is not only are we terrorizing our children through ICE and through these activities to the point where they're afraid to go to school, but we haven't solved the gun violence problem in our schools either. And so there's this double whammy effect of trauma on trauma on trauma, right? And so this idea that the means is a or the ends is a justification, right? In the way in which we're handling immigration, to me, it's just abhorrent on moral and ethical levels. And then you, on top of it, look at it from an economic perspective, and it's bad business too. So it's just like on every level, what we're doing and how we're doing it, it's just not making much sense. And speaking of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about from your perspective, excuse me, as a fiscal officer, is the federal government adequately considering these economic consequences? Because it doesn't seem like they are considering the moral or ethical consequences, but you'd think maybe the money will get them to think about things differently of these enforcement actions, or are the states just being left to absorb this fallout? What are you seeing now that you have some numbers to start to look at?
Well, I think the immediate impact is felt at the state and local level. And so I don't
Okay.
see the federal government is actually considering that. I don't think that that's just generally what we think of with the federal government, but certainly
Mm-hmm.
with the Trump administration, there seems to be very steep disregard for the impacts for certain states. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly, we feel in Colorado that we are on the list any number of ways.
Yes.
We certainly have the president weighing in on elections with
Mm-hmm.
Tina Peters. He's angry that the governor won't release her from prison, and then immediately vetoes a bill for a needed water project in the southern part of the state for drinking water.
Wow.
I can't say that there's a direct connection, but the proximity of those things was pretty stark. And
Mhm.
just FYI, the southern part of that state is a pretty red county territory.
Wow.
Just likewise with my county up in Weld County, it's a pretty heavy Republican county.
Huh.
So I'm not sure that there's much regard for, even the politics of this. It's just, almost feels like retribution or a vendetta
Yeah.
against certain states, and that, people suffering is not really, uh, part of the deal. But, the local governments and the state governments feel this pinch much more immediately,
Mm.
because their economies and their public services are dependent on those tax revenues coming in right away. We're all gonna be paying our income taxes, to the federal
Yeah.
government soon, if not already. But, I'm not sure that, that pinch is gonna be felt by the federal government as
Mm.
fast as it is by local and state and counties. So, this is it's a real question in my mind. What is the goal here? What are
Yeah.
we trying to achieve? And, I mean, there have been other administrations, I think back to the Obama administration, where they were trying to remove the criminal element from our
Mhm.
communities. They be US citizens or people who come into this country without documentation and were really causing a lot of concern with their criminal activities. They should be removed from our communities. And
Mhm.
when that is done correctly, I think people actually feel safer.
Mhm. Mhm.
They want to participate more. But when you have these new recruits into ICE that have so little training, and they're carrying weapons, and they don't appear to be following any kind of protocol,
Mhm.
utilize any kind of I dare I say common sense that I
Right.
see well-established police officers and other law enforcement officials who really know what they're doing, this scares people, and then they don't know how to operate. You know,
Yeah,
they and I think your mention about gun violence in schools. I mean, now we see these officers poorly trained with weapons,
yeah.
and I think in the past, people respected and admired and felt safe because there was somebody there, an officer of some kind, that could be called to protect and might have a weapon and might be needed, but they knew how to use it.
Mm,
But when you introduce people that clearly don't have the kind of training, then we don't know. Do they really know what they're doing? Who's going to be harmed?
right.
And even a trained police officer uh, doesn't always have the success rate, but I can tell you somebody who's not well trained is really gonna create a chaos in a situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really shown sort of this lack of preparedness, lack of training, really lack of care, going into how we're establishing this ICE force. I wanted to go back to what you said earlier a little bit about the federal government's role in all of this, because are you seeing warning signs through some of this now documentation of statistics, financial records, et cetera, of broader instability like small business closures, supply chain strains, or increased pressure on emergency system programs? Because all of this, like you said, is very much interconnected and will be felt the hardest at the state level. But eventually, these things could trickle up to the federal level at some point.
Well, it's a topic that is not the topic of the day for this broadcast, but it is the topic of the day among state financial officers today because the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the tariffs that had been imposed by the Trump administration were not done legally.
That's
And
right.
so there's all kinds of repercussions. And as state officers, we've been very vocal about those as well. The statistics are out. Family households have been already impacted by about $1,000 by the tariffs this year. That's an additional burden on them,
Mm,
and it's growing. It's not stopping; it's
yeah.
growing. Now the question is: are those tariffs going to have to be reimbursed to importers? I saw a number in the articles today. Is this news story broke today? That it might be as high as $185 billion that are gonna have to be reimbursed. They cut taxes with the tax act that the big I call it the big bad boondoggle bill, right? They've created all these, problems with the federal government's tax structure, and it's putting pressure on states and locals. I'm very tuned into the impact to Medicaid. I have a sister who's extremely disabled, and there's
Hmm.
been a $1 trillion cut to Medicaid in the big bad boondoggle bill. So, these things are just flying at us at light speed from every direction, and I think it really makes it hard for, governments to, deal with, but it makes it equally difficult for the business community to deal with as
Yeah.
well, and one of the things that we've talked about on tariffs is the fact that you don't just make a decision to onshore a business, and stand up a business overnight. It takes quite a bit of planning,
Yeah.
maybe a decade's worth of investment to make that decision. And when these kinds of decisions by the Trump administration change at the whim of the president's feelings when he wakes up in the morning, that
Hmm.
can't operate that way.
Yeah.
And so we have already has seen a slump in the economy coming towards the end of the 2025 calendar year. Now we have more disruption with the Supreme Court ruling.
Yep.
The Trump administration is now saying they're going to find other ways to reinstitute those tariffs. Who knows what's really going to happen? And so it's not just immigration and ICE activity that's creating
Right.
chaos in our communities. It's the ongoing lack of clarity about what policy is at any level. And I mentioned Doge earlier and all the
Hmm.
cuts, all the disruption to, people's lives across
Yep.
the country who are federal workers. I mean, it's just a day in and day out thing. And I think people are running out of patience with this. I know I
And
am.
I
I am
feel
past
it,
the
and
point of
I
yeah, I'm
get it,
past the
and
point of it. Yeah.
yes, and as we wrap this up, I'm really glad you brought all of those things into focus because with this show, I really try to connect dots, and all of these things feed into this same issue, which is this administration is just an agent of cruelty and chaos. And to your point, to what end? Why? What is the purpose of the tariffs and the detention centers
Right.
and all of these things? And so, as we wrap this up, I wanted to circle it back to the very beginning when we talked about the letter that you signed, really warning this administration that the economic impact of these ICE agents is causing more harm than good, especially when we look at it through the lens of the economy now that we have some hard numbers. But I want to just take that and then bring it into focus with what you just said about being fed up, which I feel that that is an echo and a ripple that a lot of us are experiencing. At what point does the economic impact become severe enough that state leaders, regardless of their party, have a responsibility to publicly push back or refuse cooperation with ICE, with the Trump regime, to protect their own economies? What will that look like, and are we getting close to that?
Oh, I think we're beyond that, and,
Oh,
I
okay,
mentioned oh, yeah.
great.
And I will I'll go back to the tariff, conversation, and we, wrote letters to the president about that, which were ignored, and now
Mm,
clearly, uh, we know that that activity was illegal by the administration, should have never been contemplated, and we made those
yeah.
warnings now. So, hopefully, the warnings that we put in this letter are heeded because, we are common sense individuals. We don't, overreact to things, but we are raising strong red flags to say, "Look, this is causing huge problems for our communities." And frankly, some of the activity and some of the attention, over and over again that we put has been on Congress.
Mhm.
Congress needs to step up and reclaim their authority, and it doesn't it's this is not a party thing. This is, our Constitution, and this
Yeah.
is the foundation of the Supreme Court ruling today is that the governor I'm sorry, the president can't use this, economic emergency, act that they said was not the right, use of that act in order to declare an emergency.
Wow.
And Congress controls a lot of the trade policy and other activities. The executive branch is supposed to carry out the policies of Congress, and now the president is just enacting policy on his own and implementing them and expecting us all to pay the price. And that's not the way our democracy should work. So yes, we need to really make sure that we go back to what we know is a working democracy and ensure
Mhm.
we have three co-equal branches of government. The Supreme Court just proved today that they, when pushed, will actually act in that regard. Maybe not often enough, maybe not strong enough all the time for us, but it was a pretty interesting result today. Now it's Congress's turn. Step
Yes,
up.
and as we wrap, it is time to step up, and I appreciate that. As we wrap this up, and thank you so much for joining me in conversation, and everyone that has tuned in. I just wanted to get your final thoughts. I mean, you've you've seen a lot in your life. You've been around. When you look at this, did you ever think, Dave, that you and I would be even having this kind of conversation? And what do you hope for the future of this country as you pass the baton?
Well, let me first just say that I have a lot of hope because I have a lot of faith in everyday people who are in this country. And it doesn't really matter what letter, if any, they put after their name politically. I think people, over the many years I've been in elected office and then all the years that I was an educator, there is a strong sense of just common sense among everyday people. And, they know what's right and what's wrong. And it may take them a while to react, but eventually they figure out what the truth is and they
Mhm.
stand. So I have a lot of hope that way. I often tell the story to people about my parents' generation. My father and mother, my in-laws, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, that generation fought in World War II against the Nazi regime that was doing the very things that we see this Trump administration doing. And, they're no longer here with us now, but I carry the sacrifice that that generation made. They made tremendous sacrifices. My uncle, my dad's brother, was killed in the Philippines
Mm.
in World War II. These were really, really difficult times, but the people came together and they knew they had to take action and they took action. My parents and my in-laws would be mortified if they were still
Yeah.
alive today to see what is going on here, and I am not about to give up that sacrifice. That's why we're standing firm and we're drawing the line and saying, "No, we can't have this kind of activity in our communities and in our country."
Dave Young, Colorado State Treasurer. Thank you so much for joining me in conversation. I so appreciate it. I'd love to have you back on. There's going to be so much more to talk about between
You bet.
ICE and the tariffs, and God only knows what else. So if you're willing, I'd love to
Exactly.
have you back for another
Love to talk to you
conversation in the
about
future.
Medicaid at some point. Absolutely.
I would love to have that. All right, we're gonna set that up. Thank you to
Feel free.
everyone.
Natalie, I just loved it and really enjoyed it. I think you're doing a great job, so appreciate
Well,
it, and call on us anytime.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And until next time, everyone, please take care of yourselves and each other. Good night. Thanks again, Dave.
You bet, Natalie. Take care, everybody.